A long time ago, on a comics page far, far away. Greetings and welcome to May the Panel Be With You, the Star Wars comic book show brought to you by the Punch Up Entertainment Network. I am your humble host, Mike Gargoni, and joining me, as always, the Ponda Baba to my Dr. Evazan, it's John Campbell.
Hello. I am always tickled by your deep Star Wars references, and and I'm never quite sure whether I should be offended by what you're saying. So,
And I think I'm going to make this a regular thing. John, do you know what I'm referencing?
you know this. It sounds familiar, but not specifically. Oh, wait, wait, wait,
Okay.
wait. Are these the guys
Huh?
at the cantina?
They are indeed the two who accost Luke at the cantina. Good
I knew
job,
that
John.
one of them had a doctorate, which never made any sense.
Well, he's a rogue doctor, so it's fine.
There's a few of those running around the Star Wars universe.
There are indeed, it's true. But we will get to a spot in the story in which a certain Ponda Baba and Dr. Evazan maybe should have been, but were mysteriously not here today because
Them.
we are talking, of course, about the earliest iterations of Star Wars comics here on the show, for now anyway. And we started back at the beginning, back where it all started in 1977 with the release of Star Wars by Marvel Comics Group. Last week we talked about number 1. This week, wouldn't you know it, we're talking about number 2.
I don't think anybody saw that coming.
Whether or not this issue is a number 2, I think is something we will discuss going forward, because there are some interesting little bits to this that I find fascinating, given that this was released in 1977. But as always, we have Roy Thomas still as the writer. We have Howard Chaykin as the penciler. We've got Steve Lealora as the inker and colorist, and Tom Orzechowski as the letterer.
Yeah, we lost Marie Severin. I guess she had better things to do. Just anything.
Well,
It would be better than her coloring this.
I mean, I don't know if the colors have gotten worse or better in this issue. It's tough to say. I can tell you right now the inks have not necessarily improved, because we still got a real bad case of old man Luke going on here.
Oh, God. Well, except, yeah, he fluctuates about 20 years in age between panels, depending on what's going on.
And we'll get to the panel with him with no eyebrows, looking like some kind of strange mutant.
There's a lot of weird Luke expressions throughout this issue in particular. I do think the colors are more consistent, if not better here. And I think that may just be a case of this person, Steve Lelola, may have had more time, is the only thing I can think of, or something like, or more ability to focus. Marie Severin may have been doing other books or something.
Well, as we talked about last time, it really does feel like these issues, especially these first 6, which are just a retreading of A New Hope in terms of their story beats, were a rush job across the board, because they were rushing to get this out once it became very, very clear that Star Wars was a massive hit.
Oh, definitely. They are striking while the iron's hot here. And dude, we got to talk about this cover, because this cover.
All right, let's bring us into the cover. Let's pull up the cover. Then there it is.
This cover is crazy town, man. Especially if you know that. Where is for such a minor interaction in the movie? I don't remember a full-on fucking murderous brawl in Star Wars. Good Lord.
For those just listening to the podcast version, we have a full Donnybrook has broken out in the cantina sequence on this cover.
We got. I mean, look at this. Look at the murderous intent on Obi-Wan and Luke's faces here. They are here to drop bodies, baby.
The cover has Luke and Obi-Wan surrounded by murderous aliens in the cantina scene, with Luke at the center, blaster drawn, saying, "Swing that lightsaber, Ben, or we're finished."
Skywalker strikes back, it says. Which is interesting that they use the term strikes back, of course. Because they...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And again, really tipping the hand here that they hadn't actually seen the movie when drawing a lot of this. We have Obi-Wan Kenobi with this bright pink lightsaber in the center of all of this.
And he's just swinging away. He's already cut this dude's throat. This guy's throwing his beer in the air. And Luke is using a blaster I've never seen before in the world of Star Wars in terms of design. And he's just shooting a dude right in the heart.
Did Luke ever have a handheld blaster in the entirety of the original trilogy? I'm trying to remember.
Yes.
He got a Stormtrooper blaster later, but did he ever just have a single-handed blaster?
He does. Well, he carries one. He has one on Dagobah with him because he pulls.
Oh, that's true. That's true. And then he has it on Cloud City later.
I think he's got like any pilot would have like a sidearm. But yeah, he's just stealing a. In the first movie, the only blaster we see him shoot is a Stormtrooper rifle, which he's shooting like a handgun, which I always thought was interesting.
Well, you got to figure with those hyper condensed gas pellets that those blasters shoot, they don't have a ton of kickback.
I always like when people try to the reasoning behind blasters and phasers and stuff is always like, the less we get into it, the better. I think. But a whole cadre of bizarre alien designs are around them here.
Yes and no, which I find very fascinating because we have quite a few alien designs here that will show up in Star Wars down the line, which makes me wonder whether or not they are things that were like in McCreary's original artwork, which some of them are. Yeah. Like the guy with the horns there is a Grottle. He'll be a staple alien that you see in the background of a lot of Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, and like this bat creature's dead on the ground. I've seen those before. The guy getting yes, they all read as Star Wars. It's just none of them in the cantina scene in the movie, certainly. And
some of them are. The guy with the horns definitely is. Prune Face definitely is. The guy on the right side there. Right. The spider faced guy is probably actually a artistic interpretation of Ponda Baba, the Aqualish character that assaults Luke.
Yeah, who's for some reason stolen Spider-Man's costume on this cover.
Well, look, it is Marvel Comics.
The coloring gives that away because the guy getting shot also has the same blue and red coloring of the Spider-Man kind of. Yeah. Luke Skywalker's. By the way, Luke Skywalker strikes back against who?
Well, let's get into this comic and get into it because right out this front page, we see that Luke Skywalker is in fact struck down, as we remember last time.
Boy. I will just say the beloved hero of the greatest space fan of all time just mouth agape unconscious on. Good Lord.
I do want to highlight the Star Wars quote unquote logo at the top of this page because it is very clear by the time they were working out the layouts to this issue, they did not have an actual logo sent to them yet, so they just kind of had to make one up when putting together this page.
It is lame.
Yeah, with the actual star shape in the A's in both words.
Yeah, I don't know what's dumber, the star shapes are pretty bad, or the speed lines.
Because it's in space, John, and space goes fast.
The letters are going whoosh. But Stan presents it, folks.
Yeah, well, Stan Lee was presenting a lot of things back then.
I think I saw that.
Because if you remember, last issue we left off with Luke getting assaulted by the Tusken Raiders as he tried to track down R2-D2. So we pick up right there with the desert-dwelling sand people, as they are called in this and the movie.
The sinister sand people, as it says here.
Yeah.
Really are trying to let you know. And I will say, even the design of them, the face masks have a little bit more like of a fang design here with the red on it. They want them to be a little bit more dangerous. Not that they're not dangerous in the movie, but, I mean, we certainly have seen enough Star Wars now that you and I have come to realize the Tusken Raiders are really misunderstood and people are kind of invading their land and maybe they have a reason to be pissed off.
Yeah, well, they absolutely have a reason to be pissed off when this floofy-haired dandy comes into their territory and starts spying on them. They decide that this kid's got to learn a lesson. So they do the proper thing and just knock him the fuck out.
Yep. And as it says here, they're not even interested in killing him. They're more interested in stripping this land speeder until a woo girl shows up.
Yeah. So in the movie, we have this strange scene that has been altered quite a few times as the special editions have rolled
almost as
on,
much as Han shooting Greedo. Yes.
which we'll talk about a lot of special edition alterations in this issue specifically, which I find fascinating.
And we get two of the biggest ones in this same issue.
Yeah, but the sound that Obi-Wan makes to chase off the Tusken Raiders here has been altered a few times.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of the novelizations, it has been described as the sound a crate dragon makes.
Yes.
Which would in fact scare the Tusken Raiders if you have seen the crate dragon that premiered in season 2 of The Mandalorian. We now know how big and nasty those things are.
One of the coolest things in Mandalorian. And I always thought that was a great explanation for what it was. Now, I don't remember, and I think I've seen about every cut they've done of it. I don't remember him ever going, woo!
Because that is the sound effect we see on the page here. It's just WHOOOOOOOOO.
It is either woo or it's whoo.
Well, we do know there's an upward inflection at first, and then it goes down based on how the letters are moving. So it's like, whoo.
Yeah. That's actually just Obi-Wan back in his home watching the game here, and he's getting a little... let's go to the next page here to see who's saying that, because now there's...
Shocker, it's Obi-Wan.
It's Obi-Wan, but... or it's Jesus. I don't know. Look at this light around him here.
To be fair, John...
I mean...
There has been much conflation of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, over the years. I've seen many a votive candle with Ewan McGregor's beautiful face emblazoned upon it.
Ewan has played both characters, so...
This is also
true. A Jesus movie, a very crazy Jesus movie where he plays both Jesus and Satan. I don't know if it's good, but it's interesting, that movie.
But our desert hobo comes wandering up out of the sands after the Tusken Raider flees, and we get this classic interaction. The dialogue's a little bit different here, and
it feels condensed. It feels comic booky,
yeah,
where it's like they have the dialogue, but they're going, how do we clip this down? Also, we get once again nobody's more surprised by Obi-Wan than R2 going bleep,
bleat bleat wheat.
The weird I understand it's sometimes hard to get sound in the comics exactly, and they probably don't know what R2 sounds like, as we've said, but it's just like, I don't think of it as a bleat bleat or a wheat. But yeah.
So we have this scene where Obi-Wan's coming in and is like, know him? Of course I know him. He's me.
I will just say though, no hello there, and I'm pretty disappointed about that.
I know, right? Well, this was before the hello there became iconic. Mm-hmm. So you got to understand that none of the Star Wars we know and love has been set in stone as of the writing.
It's always
of this.
The thing, but of course I'm reacting as a modern fan. But yeah, just the thing that gets me is going in and out, and this is still the case in comics, obviously, and it always will be. But it's so overbearing here, the way that when you're out wide, the detail goes completely away, and then they punch in. Look at this. The second panel here on this set of 4, or the first of the set of 4, second on the page.
Mm-hmm.
You've got pretty undetailed Luke and Obi-Wan, and then extremely detailed Alec Guinness. I think Alec Guinness they have the clearest likeness of, probably because he was the most known actor, where you could say Alec Guinness, and they would go, yeah, we know what he looks like.
Well, and based on the first issue, probably Peter Cushing as well.
That's true, yeah. Once again, the guys who were already established stars at the time, they're like, yeah, sure.
Well, I will say, yeah, Steve Lealoa is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in some of these wide panels with the inking. Like, there is clearly a lot going on in terms of the shading, and, like, there are large chunks of Obi-Wan that are just black.
Yep. Absolutely. That harsh desert sun, I guess.
Yeah, I thought black absorbs sunlight. That's part of why you wear the white and bright colors.
I would have thought so too, but once again, sort of ill-defined backgrounds, just some rock formations and stuff in there.
Well, we do know that he comes from a yellow planet, so if as much as Luke is from Tatooine, it keeps getting called a yellow planet in the
It's
captions.
me. I mean, number one, Desert Planet paints an image more than Yellow Planet.
Well, we can't say desert planet, John. Frank Herbert already nailed that
Well, that's
down.
true, and
So
he was already the Frank Herbert reaction of, I could sue. I won't, but I could. Was always my favorite reaction. Just like, great, man. I'll take the moral victory though. I'll let it slide, but no, I could have raised some shit about this. Uh,
Frank was the guy in the back of the theater raising a single finger, then lowering it halfway, then lowering his hand altogether.
and he's like, I've got the lawyer on hold. I'm not talking to him, but he's a phone call away.
So Obi-Wan says we have to come back, or else they'll come back in greater numbers, because of course they will.
Yeah. I don't remember 3PO losing an arm in this scene.
No, and them just bringing him back and he's all better. It serves no relevance.
This is one of two things. Either this was in the script and they ditched it for budget reasons or something, or this is just the comic book artist going, we need a little bit of something in here, a little bit of let's take the arm off the robot. Because it is interesting that, of course, he will be famously disassembled in Empire.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in this movie, he stays intact the whole film. So, and immediately this guy's apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, jeez.
I mean, look, we'll talk into the problematic relationships that droids have with everybody else in the Star Wars universe at length when we get to a droid-centric comic.
The droids, man. When we turn the page here, we see an Obi-Wan who got 20 years of sun in one page flip. Look at that.
I think he's eaten too many carrots, is what that orange skin is indicating
Look at
here.
That. Wow. I mean,
yeah, I'm not quite sure what the colorist was up to here.
Take back my comment about the consistent color in this thing. Good lord. What is this? I'm just out of the peach skin tone, so orange?
Or it suddenly became sunset in between those two panels, because this is clearly an inset from the previous scene, and then we get to Ben Kenobi's small but homey hovel, as the captions will tell us.
You gotta love a homey hovel. And 3PO's just fixed, making the entire thing pointless.
It's fine.
We once again get hologram Leia that just appears like a small Leia, though they add this one little brush of pink to make it seem like it's not on her shoulder there.
Here's what really strikes me as odd about this hologram here, because obviously they don't have the visuals of the blue flickering holograms that will become so iconic in Star Wars, so they just don't have that. That's fine. Right. What weirds me out is the fact that her dress falls so far below where she would be standing, based on, like, if this was a hologram of her saying these things to R2 in a hallway, her dress keeps falling as though there's no floor beneath her.
Right. She's suddenly floating physically as a person in the space they're in.
Right.
I don't... Do you guys... I understand they don't have the image, but you guys understand the concept of a hologram, right? Like...
Maybe they don't. I don't know where science fiction was at back in the late 70s.
Star Wars invented it by any means, though.
No. I mean, look, Star Trek existed 15 years before this came out. So, like, there was...
Forget it, pal. Also, Obi-Wan got a promotion between comic and movie, right? Because he's a commander that they mention here, not a general.
Well, I mean, it kind of goes back and forth, and especially in the Clone Wars later, like, the clones will always refer to the Jedi as commanders. So this kind of tracks for me. Within the, like, Republic Army structure, the Jedi rank is technically general, and then, like, on the battlefield, they're as commanders to the clones.
They command. They are generals who command. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All I know is Luke thinks that gal is terrific.
Yeah. Again, this was before a time in which Luke and Leia were actually related in any way, shape, or form. So we got to keep that in mind. That's what this was. That was the context in which this was written.
And we've both read the history books and stuff like that. We know that's a longer time than George Lucas cares to admit.
We know that was editing bay of Return of the or Empire Strikes Back, in which that decision is made.
Yeah, I mean, there's expressly stuff that Luke's sister was going to be a completely different character. So
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, so this is a note I don't think I remember in the movie, which is my father was just a navigator on a space freighter.
No, he says that in the
Oh, I
movie.
missed that. I guess I've.
Yeah. And Obi-Wan's line is always like, well, that's what your uncle told you, but actually,
Started.
your uncle,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was gonna say starting the long tension between Uncle Owen and Obi-Wan that we will get fleshed out quite a bit in the Obi-Wan TV series.
Well, and this also begins the long trail of Obi-Wan is a constant liar to everyone series of events.
It is a thing that, man, as much as they try to make that make sense, you're like, no, I don't know why he did that. It's still like one of the big things that as a Star Wars fan, you just kind of have to accept. But you're like, dude, why were you vague and like omitting so much and telling half truths and like, well, I didn't technically tell you he wasn't Darth Vader. It's like, come on, man.
Right. And the whole, like, your father would have wanted you to have this lightsaber when you were old enough. At what point, A, Anakin was never aware he had a son
No.
until around this time in the timeline.
Yeah.
And, like, it's not like Obi-Wan and Anakin had, like, chats where Anakin was saying, you know, Obi-Wan, when I have kids, not that I'm ever going to have kids because I'm a Jedi, but when I have kids, I hope to one day pass my lightsaber on to them.
And that's not a thing because Jedi don't have kids across the board. So I don't know.
Mostly, yes.
But Obi.
We'll talk about Ki-Adi-Mundi later.
Well, yeah, I know, but I mean, generally, it's the idea that it wouldn't be like, and then it's the lightsaber. You never hear the lightsaber is passed from father to son. But they don't know any of that. I do love the image of Obi-Wan looking like a crazy old man rummaging through his trunk. I know it's in here somewhere. Where is that thing? And
also,
more 3PO man spreading.
3PO is always man spreading. That's true. 3PO is going to air out those bolts. We know this. But specifically, I want to point out something at the bottom of this page. This is our only indication in Star Wars media up to this point of how to turn on a lightsaber.
The brightly colored button by the pommel is what Obi-Wan says.
That's a line that's definitely not in the movie. And how one turns on and like controls the length and such of a lightsaber has always been a vague mystery, at least where the movies present it, where it's like, well, they're holding the lightsaber, so then it turns on when they need it to. And how they hold specifically this lightsaber has changed from movie to movie. And the sequel trilogy is a huge, well, it's got a lot of problems, but people hold that lightsaber very differently in every scene. So how it turns on has always been like, but wait, hold, what?
I mean, you know, as a kid playing with the toys of them, they always put the button. And so I think for the longest time, I just assumed that was the button that's in the movie too. But right, there's a lot of stuff that contradicts that. But I always just thought, well, there's a big button on it, and you hit that, which this seems to indicate as well. You just hit that button.
Yeah, absolutely.
There it goes.
I just find it strange how the movies have obscured that over the years, and as to like, just put a button on it. Why not?
Yeah, I don't know what that is. It's almost like I think the movies want them to be a little bit more mystical, right? That like I'm channeling the force through the thing, and it's but
Or, and let me pitch this to you, John, the person working the props department didn't think about it at the time.
That's 100%. I think what made you may be onto something here. This is also the case in the as we turn the page here. By the way,
Yep.
I mean the pink blade is a weird decision, but the pink blade on a pink background is a objectively horrible decision.
Yeah, the colorist is really dropping the ball here. I mean, each of these first 4 panels up here just being big slabs of color with a little bit of like black detail in the background is really, really showing it's the rush job
You can
here.
talk about Obi-Wan's diva pose here that I adore, where he's just like, "That's right." The fact that they keep spelling lightsaber this way throughout it is interesting because that's not generally how it's spelled in anything.
It's how they're spelling it in the comic is Sabre, which is like a more traditional Old English way of spelling saber.
Right, yeah. Whereas anything, you go to a Target or something and look at, once again, the toys or any book or anything else, it would be Saber, Saber. So
Correct.
yeah, that's interesting to me that that's how they're spelling it here. It makes me wonder if that's how Lucas had it in the notes or whatever that they've given them.
I believe so in some of the earlier drafts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would make sense. He seems like, especially the way he's basing this off of myth and stuff like that, it would seem like he would think to spell it that way at least, because it is supposed to be an old
Hmm.
weapon, and it's a saber.
Right. But how do you pronounce that as opposed to the ER
Yeah.
spelling? Like, what's the difference in pronunciation? Nothing, really.
No. The light sabre. Uh,
Well, that's a different character entirely, John.
yeah, it's a whole different thing. And we get this. I mean, a lot of this stuff is the same as the movie. It's all just the art here that's the poses are so weird, and I
Hmm.
mean,
Constantly referring to the Force in air quotes the whole time really kind of
like
threw me.
Han Solo.
It's the
It's like
Force.
Han Solo wrote the comic, right? The Force. Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Sure.
But Obi-Wan keeps saying it.
Yeah. You must learn the ways of the Force, Luke.
Knowledge of the Force is what gives a Jedi Knight his power.
I know it. I mean, look, Obi-Wan is already one of the snarkiest characters in Star Wars, but I don't know. It seems like if anyone is going to be 100% on board with the Force, it's him. Um,
Right.
Also, just look at these first four panels and the three that Luke are in. Three very different faces on the same character. They can't keep a design on these things. I mean, Chaykin, he has to be speeding this out because we know Chaykin's a great artist, but the inconsistency between panels has got to come from it's just like I've just got to finish this thing.
Yeah, I have no idea where comic book Luke's cheekbones are because they move every single
And as
panel.
we've talked about, he ages back and forth, but sometimes he seems youthful. Other times he seems like a grizzled 50-year-old man.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah,
sometimes they're just
and in this last panel here, he's looking off sadly into the distance, saying he can't go off and help that old man on his kooky crusade, and he again looks like Prince Valiant.
100% very Prince Valiant-y. Which I get, especially if you didn't have Mark Hamill's face in mind. A Prince Valiant Luke makes sense, like if you were just to tell me the character of Luke
Mm-hmm.
Skywalker. And also, geez, once again, look at the background on that last large panel there, where they're just two yellow figures back there. And
Yeah.
it's on this
Uh,
close-up of R2 that's mostly obscured by the inset panel of Luke, which is a weird choice visually.
it's like a strange over the shoulder shot of R2 where everything in the background is kind of in soft
Yeah,
focus. I
I,
guess for in film
yeah, I
terms.
don't think I've ever seen that kind of shot of R2 in any of the movies where it's like, because also, what is it indicating? Is R2 being like, like a Brian De Palma shot?
But R2 is kind of like coming towards the quote unquote camera because that's the front of R2 right
Yeah.
there. So he's moving away from Luke and Obi-Wan.
That's what I'm saying. It almost seems like he's as much shoulder as R2 has over his shoulder, going like, I'm pretending not to listen, but I am.
R2 is always pretending not to
Yeah.
listen, but he is.
Let's go.
R2 actually knows all of the social intricacies of the Skywalker family through all of the prequels and
It's the big
original trilogy.
it's one of the strangest things to think about is R2 is the one who's like, oh, I know the whole story, man. Let's go,
At least 3PO has the excuse of having his brain wiped between episodes 3 and 4.
which fits his character. And then his brain will be wiped yet again. But we'll get.
Speaking of people that Luke thinks are just dynamite, we get a quick cut back on the next
Oh, I
page
love.
to that scene with Leia and Vader on the Death Star.
Meanwhile, aboard the Empire battle station known as Death Star, not the Death Star. It's like codename Death Star.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Well, we know later that it'll be codenamed Stardust, but that's neither here nor there.
I want to back that up to. We know this. Where is that said?
Rogue One, all over the place in Rogue
They
One.
call it Stardust? Oh, they do. Yeah, kind of. I mean, is that official, or is that just Galen Erso?
That she finds it at the end of that movie as Project
I
Stardust.
guess that's true. Yeah, it's still the Death Star itself. Well, whatever. Get into
Sure.
it. So,
Hey, we're here to get into it, John.
man, total erasure of Dr. Ball, by the way.
So, in this scene in the movie, we have a torture droid coming in to torture Princess Leia. That's what's happening here.
Yeah.
The people making this comic book don't know that in the movie it will be this very obtuse looking floating ball with all these pointy bits coming out of it that will later be christened Dr. Ball in a Robot Chicken sketch.
One of my favorite Robot Chicken sketches. Seth MacFarlane is the voice of Dr. Ball. Was it Dr. Ball MD? Isn't that the...
Yeah.
My God. But what they...
Dying of sadness? What are we? Yeah. Wizards?
What is your doctorate in poetry? I love it. But this robot is just like, this is kind of a generic design that you see in a lot of robot designs of this era.
Yeah, kind of insectoid in terms of how it looks.
Kind of looks like the robot from Black Hole a little bit.
Yeah,
got a little bit of that. It's. I just love the idea of it, like, oh yeah, it's just a droid. It doesn't read as predict. And I love the canted angle, Batman 66 shot of it, with Vader just being like, here he is.
Yeah, and there's always a little bit of Vader. Let's call it atrocity erasure, and I think this is the one that always usually falls in the chopping block floor of like, oh, by the way, he tortured Leia, like, and Han,
yeah,
and kind of Luke.
Yeah, the Han one is probably the most explicit because you at least get the idea of what they're doing to Han. Here, a thing with, Dr. Ball does have just a hypodermic needle sticking out of it, which is kind of silly. But yeah, I will say once again, it's interesting. Look at what this shot of Leia. Chaykin has lovingly done this terrified Leia, which actually makes sense if you've read his other comics.
Oh, sure. Yeah, big horror comic guy.
Yeah, and big sexy lady guy.
Sure.
He loves
and
women
there's
and specifically women in terror situations. So
absolutely. We cut back to Tatooine, the Yellow Planet, and we find Luke and Obi-Wan speeding back home on his speeder with like intense fire coming out of the back of the land speeder.
You mean the land speeder that's currently caught fire and is in real trouble? Like the land speeder looks like it's in more trouble than this blown out sandcrawler.
Which, yeah, we have them coming across the sandcrawler and Luke being like, oh, I guess the Tusken Raiders did it. And Obi-Wan saying, no, these blaster marks are far too accurate for sand people. That must have been stormtroopers, because we all know they're so accurate.
Which is always one of the funniest things. By the way, can we look at, is that a Jawa just lit on fire in that second panel of the bottom three? Look at that. Just
oh, there's a Jawa just lit on fire in the first panel, John, right there in front of Luke.
Bouldering, though, but like pretty realistic, immolated, good lord. Oh,
yeah, no, it's bad. And the fact that we get this, but we don't get Uncle Ben and Aunt Beru.
They hold back on the
Uncle Owen,
which of course the movie is one of the most like when you're a kid, you're like and those charred skeletons are just laying there. All
because yeah, we have Luke making the realization like, oh, if these are the same Jawas that had the droids, that might have led them back home. Oh no,
that Luke face is terrible.
It's just he's constantly morphing into a different person
there's
every
something
panel.
wrong with his eyes. It's just not good. Anyway, let's go home.
The dimple that is now on his chin.
Yeah, they really are just like, well, he's a hero. He's got to have a big chin, big old Kirk chin. Lead them home.
But here's mutant Luke face on the next page, though it'll be at the bottom. We'll get there.
This is the worst Luke. But yeah,
yeah,
lots of dialogue or lots of writing that explains. I do like just from off panel him going, "Wait, Luke, it's too forget it. Never mind."
Because he rushes home, and we don't actually get an explicit, like, oh, his aunt and uncle are dead on panel. We just get the captioning saying, then he suddenly sees the two smoldering piles which had once been human beings.
It's a good description from Roy Thomas, but very almost getting to Claremontian. But yeah, it really lacks some oomph when you think of comics, kind of a visual medium.
Yeah, So the only shot we get is of Luke. I guess it's Luke. His face has changed again, but he's shouting no.
No. He's shouting no twice. He goes, no. No.
His upper lip in that frame there is so weird. It like comes down and his jaw is like so much lower, and like he's just got this long lip between there's a word for it, I know, the space between your nose and your lip. There's some scientific word for that. I don't know it, but this one is at least 4 inches long.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah. And his teeth are way lower down than they should be.
No, everything about this is just like, have we seen a human face, gentlemen?
Well, clearly we have, because we have Tarkin's face in the next panel over here.
I'm pretty sure this is a reused image that they've zoomed in and turned, because I think I remember the same Tarkin face in the last issue.
Oh, I think you're right.
And
I think you're absolutely right.
It's the same detail of the Cushing face, because I remember being like, oh, they got the... Well, because also when they do the command bridge here, number one, the colors are just so disco-y, man. It's the 70s. But how ill-defined everybody is. Vader is just this, like, hulking blob in the center of this thing. And is this a Death Star operator, or is this Sark from Tron over here at the control? I don't know, man.
Look,
could go
a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Could be that. I didn't remember him showing up in this movie. And once again, Vader's helmet is just so narrow. The eyes are so narrowed, and it's very bizarre.
I will say, I am glancing back at issue 1 on a side tablet here. I don't think this Tarkin shot appeared in that issue, so that is at least something to this comic book's credit.
All right. Sorry, I doubted you, Jakin.
That's fair.
But then,
but yeah, we get Luke returning to Obi-Wan here at the end, which we always kind of glaze over the fact that Obi-Wan is just, and the droids are burning a ton of Jawa bodies when Luke comes back to this scene.
They say it in the thing, but we don't see exactly Obi-Wan heaving a Jawa body onto a burning... Oh, Luke, you're back!
Sorry, just burning the dead.
You think this is my first Jawa roast? I don't know.
Boy, let me tell you about the Clone Wars.
Ooh, we had some Jawa roast that night, your old man and I.
But yes, we get Luke being like, there's nothing left for me here. I need to go with you now. And his face lacks any eyebrows, and he looks like some kind of Morlock boiling up from the sewer.
Are they trying to do like a windswept thing on his hair? Because he suddenly has this giant forehead. And it's so weird, but it seems like they're trying to make it seem like the hair is maybe I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. It's a terrible image.
Again, his face changes in literally every panel, so it's really tough to say.
And that Obi-Wan hand is like on his shoulder, but weirdly turned.
Well, he's got very short fingers. It's like a bear claw.
I'd never noticed this. Guinness had famously tiny fingers.
Only 2 knuckles on each finger. It's strange.
Let's go to, by the way, because I knew this, I did wear for the show, everybody.
Oh, his Mos Eisley Cantina shirt. Okay.
Indeed.
Excellent.
Show some representation for the folks in Mos
Sure.
Eisley. Here, not yet a hive of scum and villainy, just a hive of villainy.
You won't find a more wretched hive of villainy, so it's fine.
Yeah. But no scum as of yet. They'll add that in the movie, I guess.
We get the scene with Obi-Wan using the old Jedi mind trick. I do like the change in this one of him doing each of the stormtroopers in succession as opposed to just a single stormtrooper. Because that actually always read as weird in the movie, is like, if he is literally just talking to one stormtrooper and swaying him, what are the other stormtroopers behind him thinking while this is going on? And I think there is actually a Robot Chicken sketch about that as well.
I'm sure I think there's a Robot Chicken sketch about everything in Star Wars at this point now. There's enough of them.
And we're better for it.
Oh, absolutely. Also, the coloring on the shoulder pad should be orange, right? So that's
again, they don't have the They probably have black and white production stills
Yeah.
of what these stormtroopers looked like.
The production stills they have are probably black and white. I also like the way that the drawing is just Obi-Wan with his hands out going like, fellas, please, everybody, calm down. You know.
Don't worry, boys. Everyone will get a taste of old Obi-Wan.
And it is something that probably works better in the comic that he goes to each of them than if he had done it in the movie. I get the movie just for obedience sake did that, obviously.
Sure.
I want to talk about, though, on this next panel when they're going into the cantina, and there's just a turtle man clearing frame there.
I mean, or is it the rump of some kind of beast of burden? It's tough to say.
He's got a pointed tail there.
Yeah, it's just some weird alien thing in the corner of the panel.
No, I don't think it's interesting for being a comic book. You'd think they'd go crazy with the cantina stuff, but they don't go as crazy as the movie does. Now, they don't have the context, but still, you would think they would start designing aliens and stuff. Instead, we don't get too much flavor of the cantina in this.
John, that would require effort and time that this comic book does not have.
No, instead, look at when we go into the cantina here on this next page. Look at these real thin strips of panel where, like, we don't want to show too much of the cantina at all.
No. Especially that first panel where we come into the cantina and everyone's just a washed out yellow squiggle in the background.
There's some aliens over here and such.
But again, this was kind of like the movie had just come out 3 months before this, and the cantina scene was becoming that iconic thing from Star Wars of just like, this is what a lived in weird alien space fantasy looks like now, and it will forever from this point on.
So yeah, exactly. I was gonna say, so much so that cantina scene is replicated time and time and time again, not just in Star Wars, but in everything. I mean, there's a cantina scene in Star Trek 3, you know? I mean, like, there's stuff like that where it's just like they go nuts with this stuff. Let's talk about these people that approach Luke at the bar, because these are not the aforementioned characters.
These are not Ponda Baba and Dr. Evazan? No, they are not. These are the Gill Man from Creature from the Black Lagoon?
Universal's putting their lawyers on the line here. Because, where's the woman from the lagoon, Luke?
Katura Vashet Shadrach.
Yeah, I mean, we get some alien language in here, which is kind of interesting. And we do get the same thing if he doesn't like you. I don't like you either.
And we got the little bat guy getting on this. Like, it's really like 4 guys accosting Luke here at the bar, which is a lot more than in the movie. In the movie, it is just the 2.
And Luke gets slapped across the room, apparently, here.
Yeah, well, I believe it's in the movie, Ponda Baba just kind of like tussles him a little bit, and that's when Obi-Wan steps in.
Luke does not hit the ground in the movie by any means. And maybe because of this escalation of violence, there's an escalation of violence to straight up murder from Obi-Wan here. In the movie, he takes the guy's arm off, which that'll teach you a lesson. Here, he's dropping 2 corpses on the ground, and he doesn't even pay and say sorry for the mess like Han does.
Well, what I do like about the comic is that the way the captioning and the art are trying to convey it, we get this caption of Ben's own lightsaber comes suddenly to life, and a wide-eyed Luke Skywalker is abruptly reminded that old Ben Kenobi was once Obi-Wan Kenobi, a Jedi Knight. So it's this flash of violence, and then in the next page we get this panel of him stowing his lightsaber back, and I'm so much reminded of like samurai Kurosawa films of the samurai pulling his blade for one quick devastating move and then slowly putting it back away as the bodies hit the floor.
It is cool, and that is, I think, definitely what we're supposed to feel in the movie too. And in the movie, there is the way it's cut and everything. There is this just quick violence and it's over, which is very cool.
Yeah,
and the guy.
I think in a more modern film, we'd get a wide shot of that slash, whereas in the movie, obviously Alec Guinness wasn't doing a lot of sword play in that film, so we don't quite get the.
I did all my own stunts.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I was game. I got jacked for that movie.
Sure. And then we get our introduction of fan favorite character Chewbacca.
Monkey face.
Yeah, this Chewbacca, I don't quite know what's going on with the face here. Again, I'm fairly certain the production stills were in black and white, because in the Chewbacca costume does have this kind of like mustache quality on the upper
does, but
lip, but it's not as pronounced as it is in this comic.
no, and the weird coloring to accentuate his face. I mean, that there is a different coloring on his face, of course, in the movie, but it doesn't look like this. And yeah, it's one of those things. It's like the uncanny valley where you're like, I get this is Chewbacca, but it's just wrong, you know?
This is thrift store Chewbacca. This is those like import toys you see sometimes where it says Chunboko or something.
Yeah, these are the toys my grandfather bought because it's like the boy likes the space movies. I picked this at a dime store, you know, and you're like, oh, it's
Right.
kind of like Chewbacca. Thanks, Grandpa. Or
The top of the box says starred Warring.
Yeah. Space battles. They do have the bandolier correct. They do say, despite a comical quasi-monkey face. Now, clearly, I think some of this is just they're reading probably what Lucas had written in descriptions of the characters. But I don't think of Chewie as having certainly a comical face. And also, he looks fucking pissed when he comes on this panel. Look at that. He's ready to do some business.
What I find interesting about just people's reaction to Chewbacca is I've heard this range of commentary from people at the time being like, well, look at him. He's just a big furry dude. Why would we take him seriously? Obviously, we have the context of 30 years of no. Chewbacca's also a badass. You give Chewbacca respect.
Oh, of course. Chewbacca's one of the coolest characters in all of Star Wars, obviously. I mean, it's one of those things where that almost doesn't need to be said, but now I feel like I do have to say it in this conversation.
Right, because at this time they didn't have that context, so they were just like, yeah, of course he would look slightly absurd next to all these other characters because he's this big furry Sasquatch looking.
I also love Obi-Wan just going like, "This is Chewbacca. He's a Wookiee."
If that wasn't clear.
And of course, the classic Chewbacca catchphrase, "Gronk."
Well, look, we hadn't established the Gonk droid just yet, so we had to have somebody doing a Gronk somewhere
Gronk.
in here.
What are you doing?
Also, how on earth do you write out the Chewbacca noise in comic books? People have struggled with that forever.
They definitely have. It's an interesting thing. The just like, what is that sound? I don't know.
Yeah, no idea. But we get Chewbacca introducing them, as they do, to Han Solo.
Oh, and
in the next page over here.
If the Luke face is weird, oh, the Han Solo face is so much stranger. We also see he's going to lead them over there. Meanwhile, 3PO and R2 are outside seeing some guy ratting them out.
Yeah, and in the movie, I think it's that long-faced spy dude, and this is just some strange pink alien.
With his shirt really stood out to me when I was reading this last night. The weird bumblebee striped shirt on him.
Yeah.
And then, boy, you want to talk about doing some manspreading. Meet Captain Han Solo.
Well, look, Han Solo was introduced to the world manspreading, so...
He is so casual. But, boy, this face. Oof. And I'm not even talking about likeness to Harrison Ford. I'm just talking about human facial features.
Yeah, there's some strangeness going on here. A too much shading and not enough happening both at the same time.
So yeah, we get the classic, of course, the same introduction from the movie Fast Ship. You mean?
Yeah, and the dialogue here is just basically beat for beat.
Kessel Run.
Han Solo.
Yeah, just myself, the boy, and 2 droids, and no questions. You know, they don't want Imperial trouble. Go to the next page. Oh my god. This first panel on the next page is wild. Number one, Han Solo has no face now. And Luke is ready to murder.
Luke has suddenly turned into Adam Warlock in the Infinity Gauntlet saga.
100%. He's got no
with pure white eyes.
No pupil. And it continues the next he's kind of aghast in the movie. Right? Like, he's like, 10,000? We don't need this. Here he's like, I'm going to kill this guy, Ben. Hold me back.
Well, this is a classic scene in A New Hope where if you're playing the Star Wars drinking game, the part of the game for A New Hope is number of times Luke whines in the film. This is a bit where you finish your beer,
Yeah.
is this scene.
Except if you haven't seen the movie and just read this, it doesn't come off as whining. It comes across like, once again, he's coming across the table at him.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And
I'm not-
Obi-Wan's holding him back.
Well, Obi-Wan, now played by Orson Welles in this panel.
Yeah, wow, it does look like that. He's lost his mustache, too.
His face is a lot fuller, no mustache, and then completely different design of Chewbacca, basically, who's just kind of like, eh.
Again, the inker here is doing so much heavy lifting in terms of trying to fill in detail.
Well, look at how the background is just black at this point. Like, we're not even trying. And then gossiping stormtroopers on the next panel where they're like, hey, you see that guy over there? Yeah, I clocked him, buddy. Just
You want to take the lead on this one? I took the last one.
they're so, like, they're right next to each other. He's whispering in his ear, which is so silly to see Storm. Also, they're a little they're a little too chunky.
I think it's supposed to be like a forward momentum thing, like one's ahead of the other one and they're coming forward so the shoulders are bigger, but it doesn't read that way because their perspective is all wrong.
You know what? The bartender is actually not a bad likeness to the guy who plays the bartender in the movie.
I swear to God, I bet they had a production still of the bartender and they knew what he was going to look like.
And him just going like, yeah, over there.
But then we just have Han and Chewie at the table by themselves going, can't help you, buds. Sorry.
It did always look pretty guilty in the movie to me that they're like, what? What? You gonna start something?
Yeah, but that's like everybody at the cantina, right? Is always going to be like, what? I got nothing.
What you looking at? Yeah, because I mean, it's kind of the stormtroopers got to be looking the other way in a lot of crap, and most obviously, right?
I think the stormtroopers here probably had the cushiest gig in the galaxy until Vader rolls up with with chasing the droids, and now suddenly they have to work.
Nobody cared about Tatooine. They talked about that in the last issue, and I think that's true. But then it's because problems here. It's like, oh man, I was so thrilled to be stationed on Tatooine. We're like, honestly, you can probably take a little cash under the table and look the other way on some stuff, you know.
Oh, you know Jabba's got these guys paid off.
Oh, we're going to talk about Jabba soon, because Jabba...
Oh, yeah, we are.
Wild. Let's talk about Greedo, though, who's dead on. Talk about they had to have had production stills of Greedo, because they have lovingly, almost of any character, they have lovingly recreated Greedo here. The colors are kind of...
Greedo. Yeah, again, I'm guessing all the production stills were in black and white. But we do have Greedo here, a classic Rhodian with his big eyes, weird funnel mouth, and proboscis ears coming out the top.
Yeah, and of course he's in English here, which of course they recorded it in English and the dialogue was, and then you get the solo.
He's speaking Huttese, John.
Yeah, I know that, but I don't know the language, so...
Now, clearly, Greedo opens fire on Han, which gives him the ability to fire back at Greedo here, thus rectifying the moral scales is what happens here, right?
That's right, although not a McClunky insight. But no.
No, in fact...
It's what it is in the movie, which is, he says, I'm going to kill you. I never understood where Lucas thought like, it's pretty clear what's going to happen, but also Han, obliterates this man with the most powerful blaster shot in the history of Star Wars, according to this panel. Because look at him.
Yeah.
Does he shoot him out the side of the bar?
It's a pretty dramatic blast. I've read ahead slightly in this. I don't even think the Death Star laser is quite this dramatic.
I mean, he gets murdered with a capital M, Greedo here. There's nothing left of this guy.
Also... why is Han's leg now back up on the table when he does that? When it's clearly under the table in the previous couple of panels.
Threw the leg up, then he shot the guy.
Right. Or maybe he threw the leg up and shot beneath the leg just for an extra spin move to it.
I will say, first time I feel like they've got one of the blasters right. That is pretty accurate to Han's blaster.
Yeah. And of course, we get the classic Han throwing the guy a coin, being sorry for the mess.
I mean, he even in this poorly drawn comic, he's still the most badass dude in a galaxy far, far away. And Chewie,
we get
once again, stern-faced. All right.
We get a riveting couple of panels on the next page of Luke selling his speeder.
I'm glad they included this, including this Flash Gordon extra woman over here in the pink number.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Hold on. I just am now seeing this little alien guy with his hands in his pockets. I don't know why that makes me laugh, but there's something funny about a Star Wars alien just being like, yeah, you know what I told her, man.
I love a casual Star Wars alien. One of my favorite bits of the recent Andor show is in I think the third episode or the second episode, when that big alien heavy is just trying to intimidate Andor, and then he's just like, "Oh, I'm just getting paid to stand here, man."
Yeah. But I just like the idea. It's just like, yeah, man. So, so I went down there last night, and I gotta tell you, man, it was pretty wild.
But then, speaking of things that Lucas changed later on, we get the inclusion of a scene that wouldn't be added to A New Hope until the special editions.
Oh, no.
And that is Han.
You're talking to Jabba. Before we get to Jabba, I just want to talk about who is this mysterious guy?
Oh, this in the movie would be that long-faced alien who was tracking them to the spaceport.
That's so interesting because they make such a big deal out of him in the comic in a way the movie just kind of hints at. But here they make it seem like, and a hidden villain waits in the shadows.
Yeah, I know that guy has a name. I am struggling to remember it. I definitely read at least one novella starring him as the main character.
This speaks to the thing where it's just like, that is a guy I clocked in that movie as necessary and then never thought of. When you talk about, I know his name. I never knew his name. But yeah, I mean, you talk about, they definitely have the script, but this Jabba scene.
Garandon, of course it's Garandon. Why wouldn't I know that? Also known as Long Snoot.
That actually makes sense to me. But let's go to Docking Bay 94 and meet a very different Jabba that, look, I know. It's one of those things I know, but it is so weird to read.
Yeah, because in the original film, they filmed this scene in which Jabba confronts Han at the Millennium Falcon before they get a chance to leave Mos Eisley. And Han being like, hey, I know I owe you money, I'll get you the payment, I've got this easy job, it's all gonna be good, Jabba. And Jabba being like, oh, Han Mibuki, une wange suno ono.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yes, exactly. But the way they shot, if I'm not mistaken, there was just a guy there, right? Like a guy in a fur coat. Is that right?
Yeah, it was just some big, crime-looking dude,
like
because they didn't...
kind of guy, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't know that Jabba was going to evolve into a giant space slug. They thought he was just some crime boss.
Nobody had figured that out.
No.
So that's why you get the weird animation where he steps on the tail and stuff. And also, as we've talked about, I never understood why Lucas put that back, except for just, I guess, the fan service of Jabba, because it establishes the exact same thing the Greedo scene establishes. It was a good cut.
And it does one other thing, which Star Wars fans of a certain ilk will be aware of, and that is it retroactively makes the first appearance of Boba Fett in A New Hope.
That's right. Boba Fett is there. Okay. You know, sort of like... Cool.
Yeah, exactly.
I love Boba Fett just like everybody else does, but like, I don't know that it adds anything. Once again, it's kind of an extraneous scene that, if anything, I think damages the pacing of the special edition version.
And actually, I'd have to go back and watch, but I don't even... Is the special edition... I know it re-adds the CG Jabba in that scene. I'm struggling to remember if Boba Fett was also actually a CG inclusion in that scene, or if he was originally shot there.
He's a CG inclusion.
I'm not actually
They
sure.
also add him into Mos Eisley, too, in the cantina. They have him watching Han. Here, though, he's backed up by a blue guy and an orange guy.
Yeah. So we have the weirdest Jabba the Hutt here. He is a tall, yellow-skinned alien with these extreme mutton chops coming down to either side. He looks like a combination of like a basset hound and a ferret, but he's wearing this pumpkin orange jumpsuit and these big green
Just
gloves,
say,
and he's dressed kind of like an Imperial officer.
I don't think he'd go down as one of the great Star Wars villains had he been looking like this.
Yeah, especially in the next page when we get his face in more detail, and like his eyes are these pure black, like a ferret's kind of, and he's just got a very goofy look.
Talk about a character aging. I didn't know that for one panel, Mel Brooks staple Kenneth Mars played Han Solo. What is this? Look at this. Who the hell is that guy? His nose is a totally different shape.
Yeah, I don't know. The faces are real. Faces are hard, John. Faces are so hard.
Oh, I don't know. We've seen other comics though where they've done it. Once again, and Howard Chaykin can do it. It's just I think it is a rush job, and everybody's just going like, get this out of there, because it is like, yeah, he is like one of comics' most iconic, artists, and a guy who had his own style. Also, this is real early in his career too. He's not yet Howard Chaykin.
Mm-hmm.
Let's head to the ominous Death Star, and this guy in an Imperial uniform I've never seen before, all black with some green.
Got some jobbers there with the big puffy legs.
Mm-hmm. And it just, I don't know. There's just something weird about this Vader pose. Like he's casually striding. I mean, I know Vader.
Yeah, he's got the powerful arm forward and the cape over one shoulder. I think it's fine.
I don't know. There's something about just catching him mid that. And actually, this next panel is, I think, Chaykin's best rendering yet of the Vader mask.
Yeah, the big problem with his rendering of the Vader mask is that it continues to change. So seeing one that's normal is actually equally off-putting because it isn't like the weird Gumby face we're getting used
What's
to.
interesting, I do feel like this is often the case when he punches in on these individual panels, like that one of Leia we were talking about earlier. That's where Chaykin's like, okay, I can really get in and do the likeness, and then everything else is a little whatever.
But yeah, we have Vader strolling down the hallways of the Death Star, and on the next page, we cut immediately back to the landing bay.
This section of the movie doesn't actually have a lot of Vader in it, so they're just putting in Vader where they can. So there's just these little, because they know Vader's selling books, I also like we get all the what a piece of junk. There's not a lot of emphasis on the Falcon, which is interesting. It's always kind of at a distance here.
Yeah, we get some good shots of it in the last couple of panels of this issue, but yeah, and they clearly knew what the Falcon was going to look like, but drawing that much detail every single page would be a giant pain in the ass, and that's clearly not something they're willing to do here, based on the second panel of this page, in which the stormtroopers that are coming in look like they've been melted in the sun.
Yeah, these are, son, you left your toys outside. I don't know what happened here.
Yeah.
Oh. And is this the long snoot guy running away, having ratted them out?
I guess it doesn't matter.
Robe was booking it out of there.
Yeah. So we've got them firing on the stormtroopers, and the stormtroopers firing back as they try to make their escape from Mos Eisley.
Shooting at them by the landing the ramp. That definitely is a still, because you see that still used all the time, and they definitely had that because the pose is dead on to the Harrison Ford. I mean, Harrison Ford, one of the great shooting stance actors in film history.
Yeah, with Han, he's got the one boot up on the ramp, and he's firing back over. The fact that they probably had that still, but still didn't make it look like Harrison Ford is actually troubling.
It's very weird, because I definitely had this picture on my wall as a kid of Han shooting like this. Actually, they captured the run. Although it's a weird when he's running into the Falcon here, his arms are out the side of him. Like he's not like a run like that, but more just like his arms are, and he's going, hey!
I don't know. It's a very strange action pose.
And once again, Chewie hits us. This time not with a gronk, but a grunk.
Well, it's a very different word in Shriwook, John. You got to understand.
He's gotten way furrier in this panel.
Yeah, he's starting to look a little bit more like Marvel's Sasquatch, the Alpha Flight team member.
He definitely is.
Which I don't actually know the history of Alpha Flight, so I don't know when that character's origin comes about, but it probably would have been around this time, honestly.
It's got to be late 70s, early 80s at the latest.
Yeah.
So I think we're right in that phase. Because I mean, we don't talk about it too much, but there definitely is. You can see the influence of some of the. I mean, you mentioned the Adam Warlock thing. You can see some of the sort of stock designs of what Marvel characters look like in
Mm-hmm.
comics, where you're like, oh yeah, that looks like a Marvel thing. So the Millennium Falcon takes off. This space battle above Tatooine, which is very yellow, of course, because it is a yellow planet.
Of course, the Yellow Planet, John.
Yeah, the where are we going? Do you guys know where the yellow planet is? Because that's where everybody's going.
Oh, you mean Tatooine? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yellow Planet.
But I have some weird stuff. Number one, these Star Destroyers banking turns, man.
Hitting those hard 90-degree turns like Star Destroyers can do.
You don't see that too often. And they're all trailing this pink smoke, which is weird too. Uh,
I I really want to see somebody hijack a Star Destroyer and drift that thing into a hard
oh,
banking turn.
I would love that. And actually, if you read Colin Trevorrow's script for Star Wars Episode 9, that kind of happens.
I can't talk about Duel of the Fates, John. It just makes me sad.
It makes me sad too, but that's kind of the whole opening sequence, is stealing the Star Destroyer and taking it for a ride. But I also want to talk about the complete lack of detail under the Millennium Falcon. And once again, they don't have the design, so it's more like flying saucer kind of here.
Yeah, and again, I think drawing all of the excessive detail that they might even actually possess is probably not something they're willing to commit time to.
No, it's so interesting because, once again, reading Star Wars comics today, it's all ingrained in us because everybody making them has grown up with them. So every detail is so lovingly recreated. I do think
Speaking of like very intricate details, though, if we get a scene here inside the Millennium Falcon cockpit, and there is a precise detail that really didn't become important until down the stretch here in the Disney era, and those are the dice that are hanging in the cockpit.
they're
here.
just like normal Earth dice, but still, that they put that in there is very interesting to me, especially as someone who, yes, drives around with those dice hanging from the rearview mirror of my car. So,
Sure, yeah.
because I'm a nerd. We're doing the Star Wars comics podcast. Once again, don't need to talk about nerd bone.
Think it's fine, John. Yeah, my license plate cover says Toy Yoda,
Yeah.
so we're on even footing there.
Yeah, we both got a bunch of dumb nerd stuff on our car. But once again, Chewie, just so many crazy catchphrases. Now we got a Kronk.
Oh, the classic Kronk. That is a words of wisdom in Shrewook.
And you talk about the inconsistency. Pretty good Harrison Ford likeness on this close-up. I don't know who the guy in the next panel is.
Oh, you don't recognize famed character actor Jimmy Stewart in this last panel?
Well, we're gonna jump to light speed, everybody.
Doesn't that look like Jimmy Stewart?
It does. It looks like Jimmy Stewart with a 70s wig on.
Yeah.
What, Chewie? Let's get out of here before the Empire catches us. Man, you know, he was still alive and acting at this point. How come Jimmy Stewart didn't end up in Star Wars? May the Force be with.
Self-respect, I think, is the answer.
I mean, at the time, it wasn't a sweet gig exactly. I mean, they
Right.
had to really convince Guinness and stuff. Cushing was on board, obviously, but he was a schlock.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a Hammer actor, so.
Yeah.
But then we get this next page. We get the Empire's chasing them down. We need to make the jump to hyperspace. Everybody strap in. Ain't like Dustin Crop's boy. I like that line is still in here.
And we're back and forth between the Han and the Jimmy Stewart again. And then the last panel here where they're losing the deflector shield. And a Han going, and a pissed off Skywalker once again.
Yeah, Luke. This is another scene in the Star Wars drinking game where it's like, if Luke whining about stuff is all over this scene, it's like, what's that? What's those? What does this button do? And Han just being like, shut the fuck up.
But somehow, the people at Marvel have interpreted that whining to be, this character is furious most of the movie.
Again, big problem with flat text. The tone of voice is not conveyed.
Because I just like the idea there's a warning light and Luke would be like, what's that?
And famously, George Lucas, not an amazing director when it comes to
What?
giving people direction with emotional stakes.
No, he was very in depth about that.
Faster and more intense, I believe, is his constant
As he
refrain.
once told Harrison Ford, "Just say what's on the page." What? How am I feeling about this? Just say the words. Uh,
Yeah, a lot of Dutch angles going on in this page.
Very much so. The directors of Batman '66 got a hold of this somehow.
I think it's meant to convey the, like, oh, we're tumbling through space, but the fact that all the bodies are standing perfectly still and not bracing themselves on anything
Well,
really belays that
get
motion.
to the next page because talk about bracing something. Look at this 3PO pose.
Yeah, 3PO's tumbling head over heels. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan's sitting there like it's no big deal.
I've been through this.
As we make the jump to hyperspace
We
in the most disco-tastic.
Wow, 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 wow. Yeah, here we go, man. It's crazy. Also we get R2 going beep a deep, beep a deep.
Beepity beep beep beep.
Yeah, and then there's rainbow colored jump to hyperspace. And Gorgoni, next issue, out of hyperspace and into the Death Star.
Wait. So here it's the Death Star, but earlier it's just Death Star.
Yeah, they don't know what it's. I think it's beyond the things that are obviously different in the movie. The just lack of attention to detail in a Marvel comic is so interesting to read. And certainly, like some comics got more time and love in them than others did, but it is just like there's the inconsistency within this. It just shows they're like, we just need this to get out, man. I don't know what to tell you. This was no one's
Oh,
priority.
absolutely. Yeah, and obviously we are nearing the halfway point of the saga of this first movie. So next time, who knows what might happen? We might actually get onto the Death Star, a certain beloved.
Gorgoni, it says we're going to be into the Death Star, so.
Into the Death Star. I mean, who knows what that could involve?
I don't know, man. I hope things go well when they're on the Death Star. That's all I hope.
Yeah, so long as they don't go down into any trash compactors, I think we should be fine.
That'd be too scary for me. I don't think I can handle that. I hope nothing happens to Obi-Wan. I really like that guy.
Yeah, so we are still right in the middle of A New Hope. We have about 4 more issues left before we get out into the truly bizarre
I
stuff.
thought that as I finished this, I go, how are they going to crank it up? I don't feel like they're, was it a third of the way through the movie? I feel like they're more than that at this point. But we're gonna slow it down, I think.
John, I know you're not a huge manga fan, but there's a term that we, in the appreciators of Japanese comic book art form, have come to loathe, and that is the word filler. And we shall approach some filler here in the near days, but it will make for good discussion, I think.
But yeah, there's issue 2 of the original Star Wars comic book.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next time with issue 3. What will happen to those crazy kids as they enter into the Death Star? But until then, I have been Mike Ergoni.
And I am John Campbell.
And may the panel be with you.